I am thoroughly looking forward to reading another book about a man. It's gonna be great. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another video. Happy New Year! It won't be the new year still by the time you are watching this video. It'll be I'm gonna estimate late March, maybe early April. And yeah, I guess we'll see if I'm right in that. But at the time of filming, it is currently January 1st, so it is the perfect time to begin a kind of a new long-term challenge for the year. I've never done something like this before on this channel. Normally, when I set myself a reading challenge, I just set it for like a month maximum. I don't have the best attention span and I'm quite a mood reader, so like I think this is going to be a little bit of a challenge to fully commit to, but I'm ready for it. Do you like the fit? I am currently sporting merchandise for the Women's Prize. This is a t-shirt that has little illustrations on it for each of the last 30 winners of the Women's Prize for Fiction, and I got it for Christmas because I knew that this was going to be a challenge that I was going to take on, and this is the ceremonial t-shirt that I will just be wearing to film these clips at least until like after I've done the challenge, and then I can just like use it whenever, I guess. It says 30 brilliant books by women. I'm just going to move my hair out of the way so that you can see. So this challenge is to do with the Women's Prize. I have, over the last couple of years, been steadily amassing all of the winners of the Women's Prize for Fiction. There are currently 30. I think probably by the time I finish this challenge, there will be 31, plus 3 winners of the Women's Prize for Nonfiction. And currently, I have an entire shelf in my bookcase that is full of these books that I have almost entirely bought secondhand. I think since I kind of decided this was a challenge I wanted to take on at some point, I have bought all of these books secondhand. There are a couple that I bought new, but just because I wanted to read them. But yeah, almost all of them are secondhand. I got quite cheaply. So yeah, that I guess has been a decent investment, I suppose. And I have decided that this is the year that I read all of the winners of the Women's Prize. So that is what we are going to do in this video. This is going to be part 1. The way I kind of want this to work so that I don't try and read all of them at once and get incredibly burnt out and go into a massive reading slump, which would be terrible for my mental health. I am going to slightly pace myself. I'm going to make 3 videos in 3 parts, each part covering 10 years. So this part 1 is going to be covering the first 10 books, the first 10 winners of the Women's Prize for Fiction. I'm not going to be rereading anything unless I like really have the desire to at the time. There are, I think I've read 6 out of the 30 winners of the Women's Prize for Fiction so far. So that means I have 24 left, and then I've read 1 of the Women's Prize for Nonfiction winners, so I have 1 left of those. So yeah, overall that is 25 books left, and of the 6 books that I have read, or 7 books that I have read, I'm not planning on rereading them just because that would take up a lot of time. So yeah, I won't be doing that. This doesn't really apply to like this video specifically, this part, because I believe that out of the first 10 books, I haven't read any of them yet. It's more kind of as we get to like the more recent winners. I've read quite a few of those, but I'm just going to say it here anyway. If I have read the book already, I will give like I will give a review of it unless I have already read it and reviewed it in a previous video, in which case I will like maybe say a couple of sentences, but I will signpost to that particular video. If you want a review of that book, you can go there, just to like, you know, save time and also my sanity. And like some of these books I will have read a couple of years ago, and my memory won't be great, so you're probably more likely to get a more accurate review if you go back to that video if I'm talking about it. So we have 10 books per video. I'm going to try and do 6 books per month. I'm going to set myself a little goal of reading 6 books a month, just so again I don't kind of overstretch myself and yeah, going to burn out. So it'll be spread out over 4 months, but that is not including the months that I have my themed reading challenges. So I won't read any books in February because I've got Fantasy February. Won't read any in May or June because I've got Mythology May and Pride Month. So over January, March, April, and July, hopefully I will have finished the challenge by the end of July so that I can do. I want to do like an entire month focused on Women in Translation Month in August this year. So hopefully I will have finished the challenge by then. So yeah, 6 books a month spread out over 4 months, but actually spread out over like 7 months. Um, Plus the non-fiction book that I have yet to read. Plus, eventually, the next two winners of the women's prizes will be announced as well. So I will read those also. It all sounds very complicated now that I'm saying it, but it makes sense in my head, I promise. What you guys need to know is that in this video, I will be reading 10 books, the first 10 winners of the Women's Prize for Fiction. And we're going to start off with the inaugural winner. This is A Spell of Winter by Helen Dunmore. This was the very first winner of the Women's Prize. It was originally called the Orange Prize. Um, I don't know why. I think maybe was it sponsored by Orange? Like the really old phone company that doesn't really exist anymore. Is it a phone company? It's like a telecom company. I don't know. I can't remember. But this won the very first prize in 1996. So this book is older than I am. So it is historical fiction, which is immediately, yeah. I'm not really a big fan of historical fiction. I'm especially not a big fan of historical fiction set in kind of the early 20th century. That's like my least favorite historical period to read about. Anything about like the First World War or the Second World War, I'm like, no thanks. I don't know why, but I just kind of find it especially dull to read about. Um, so yeah, it's not a great start. I'm not really expecting to enjoy this book. From the sounds of it, it sounds quite slow paced. Um, and yeah, I feel like I might get bored with it. But because I'm setting my expectations low, there is always going to be room for me to be pleasantly surprised by it. So yeah, if you expect disappointment, then you will never truly be disappointed. And who knows, maybe this will be the atmospheric, wintry book that I need in these trying times of January and seasonal depression. I'm going to make a start on this and I will see you at some point when I finished it and I'll let you know my thoughts. Hey, I'm back. I finished a book. Hooray. This is A Spell of Winter by Helen Dunmore. It won the inaugural Women's Prize for Fiction, then known as the Orange Prize, in 1996. This is a historical fiction set somewhere in the English countryside. I don't think it's ever specified where, but somewhere. Um, Kind of in the years before, during, and after World War One. Most of it is before World War One starts, and then kind of the last quarter of the book, I want to say, is kind of during and after. The book is from the perspective of our main character, Kathy, who is kind of growing up and coming of age in a kind of dilapidated manor house with her older brother, Rob, and her grandfather and some staff. Um, their mother has left them, just kind of abandoned them without warning. Their father was sent to a sanatorium. So there's a little bit of kind of trauma, there's a bit of an abandonment complex going on there. And we kind of spend the book watching Kathy kind of growing up, um, spending a lot of time with her brother. She comes of age, starts, experiencing certain desires. Um, she's got a bit of a darkness living within her, kind of a desire to keep things the way they are, even when the world is changing and people are changing around her and she's growing up. She wants things to remain the same and she kind of uses any means necessary to keep them that way. Until eventually the First World War starts and control is pretty quickly wrenched from her. I found this book pretty boring, I'm not gonna lie. I think part of that is because the subject matter didn't interest me. Um, I'm not into historical fiction. I'm especially not into historical fiction that's kind of set in the early 20th century. The book is really slow paced and it's very kind of gothic and atmospheric. There are some lovely descriptions of the the English countryside in winter, and just kind of the wilderness. It's a little bit kind of Wuthering Heightsy, but the pacing is so slow. I could probably give you like maybe two or three major events that occur in this book that were interesting, and then the rest of it is just it's slow and nothing much happens. Especially towards the end. Like I feel like the book went on for far longer than it should have done. I think there was like a definite kind of ending point. And then there are like 50 more pages where things just carry on. And it's like you get to a point where you are past the point of caring. It is incredibly dark at times. I don't know if I should mention because it's kind of a spoiler, but also like I feel like you ought to know before going into this book. There is a massive content warning for incest. Once again, I feel like we're at a point where this becomes kind of a recurring thing on my channel and I hate it. Why am I constantly being surprised by incest? This is the first book I read in 2026. Why? Why did it have to have incest in it? So yeah, once again, it is my own fault for not reading the content warnings. Let that be a lesson to you. Um, yeah, it's very dark. Content warning for incest and abortion and pregnancy, um, and death. Yeah. But even with all of that darkness, like the rest of the book is so dull. It's so dull that I almost wanted more dark content just to kind of make the book more interesting. So, yeah, first book of the video was a bit of a flop, I'm not gonna lie. But I guess the only way is up. The bar is on the floor, I hope. I'm gonna bring up actually the other books that were nominated for the prize in the same year. I haven't read any of them. There are actually quite a lot. How many? 6, 12, 20 books overall were nominated. Quite a few familiar names actually. You've got Andrea Levy, A.L. Kennedy, Pat Barker, Anne Tyler. A lot of authors that I see at work in the secondhand bookshop where I work. I haven't read any of these, so I couldn't really tell you whether or not A Spell of Winter deserved to win the prize that year. Um, just from like the looks of the covers, though, it does kind of look like a lot of the books are historical fiction. It does skew very historical fiction. It skews quite British and like Commonwealth. Um, it is overwhelmingly white, I think, as well. A lot of the authors do appear to be white, which does make sense. I mean, this is the mid 90s. It's the first year of the prize. They're definitely still like ironing out some creases, and in recent times, the prize has gotten quite a bit more diverse, at least in terms of like race and nationality. But yeah, it's definitely something that I have noticed. So that is one book down, and for this video, 9 books to go. I'm going to move straight on to the next book. This is Fugitive Pieces by Anne Michaels. This won the prize in 1997. There's no blurb on the back, it's just like a list of quotes saying how good the book is. So, yeah, hopefully I will agree with all of those quotes. So I'll make a start on this and I will let you know what I think. Hey, I'm back and I have finished another book. I finished this in the bath. So hence my hair still being a little bit wet. Um, yeah, I've just finished this. This is Fugitive Pieces by Anne Michaels. This won the second Women's Prize for Fiction in 1997. It is another wartime historical fiction. This one takes place kind of during and after World War II rather than World War One. It is kind of written as like a fictionalized memoir of a poet called Jacob Beer. He didn't exist in real life. I had to look up and check to see if there was an actual like real life Jacob Beer, but it's all fictional. Like inspired by stuff that actually happened, but fictional. So at the very beginning of the book, Jacob is a young Jewish boy who is forced to watch his parents uh, be murdered by German soldiers, and his sister be kidnapped and we presume sent to a concentration camp. He manages to escape. He gets taken in by a Greek geologist, who ends up raising him, kind of taking him in as his own adopted son. And the rest of the book kind of takes place between Greece and Toronto in Canada, where they eventually migrate to. And we see Jacob grow up, um, become an adult, basically live his entire life, um, while kind of still dealing with the effects of the war. Even decades after it happened, he still suffers from PTSD, from nightmares. He's still haunted by the ghost of his sister, because he never found out what actually happened to her. And then the second part of the book, so like about two-thirds of the book are taken up by these like fictional memoirs, and then the second part, like the last 100 pages or so, um, we jump to a completely different point of view. It's told from the perspective of a student of one of Jacob's friends at university, who, like, for some reason, shares a bit of an affinity with Jacob and his work, despite having met him like once, and ends up like discovering these memoirs basically. And it was, not gonna lie, quite a jarring jump from one perspective to an entirely different character who we hadn't met before. Um, I did spend a lot of that part wondering, is this even necessary? Could we have finished the book then and there at the end of the memoirs? I did kind of warm up to it by the end of it. The last kind of 20 pages or so managed to tie things up quite nicely, but yeah, I'm still not 100% sure on that really. The writing style is lovely. It's very lyrical, very poetic, which makes sense because Anne Michaels, before writing this book, this is her debut novel, which is kind of astounding. Before writing this, she was a poet. She wrote poetry, so it does make sense that her prose is very poetic in nature. But I do feel like the pacing does kind of get lost. It gets sacrificed when so much work is put into the the writing style. It does move very slowly. The tenses kind of jump about a little bit. Like you get like paragraphs in the past tense, then you suddenly get paragraphs in the present tense. Um, Chronologically, it's a little bit weird as well. You're not always sure when each kind of little section, each chapter is set, because there are a lot of flashbacks, which again doesn't really help with the pacing and kind of keeping track of where you are in the story. And then again, it's the whole kind of thing of like, this isn't really the subject matter that I'm particularly interested in. Like, once again, it is a wartime historical fiction, which doesn't interest me particularly. I could see the appeal. The writing style was nice, but I did just end up pretty bored for a lot of it. So, yeah, overall, once again, this book just wasn't really for me. I can see the appeal, but yeah, not really my thing. I did find it less offensive than A Spell of Winter, though. I did read this in like a couple of days. I think I read it in literally 2 days, but that was less because I was like gripped by it and more because I just wanted to get through it. So yeah, Fugitive Pieces. Shall we have a quick look to see what other books were nominated in the same year? See if I actually recognize any this time. To 1997. Um, we've got Jeanette Winterson, um, Linda Grant, who we will be seeing again later in this video. Um, Joan Didion, interesting. And Margaret Atwood, alias Grace, was nominated. Interesting. Again, none of the books are books that I have read in the past. Some recognizable names. Again, kind of overwhelmingly historical fiction and white. Slightly less white than the previous year. But yeah, still. So yeah, that's it really. It's another book down, several more to go. So shall we move on to 1998 then? And this is the book Larry's Party by Carol Shields. I am thoroughly looking forward to reading another book about a man. It's gonna be great.
Why would a man be there? Why would a man be there? No, it's actually pissing me off.
This is definitely like the tattiest book out of all of the books I have for this video. Yeah, $6.99. God, you can just tell how old this book is. It went for $6.99. I wish books could still be that cheap. So yeah, I will get started on this. Wish me luck. I could really use a win right now. I really hope I enjoy this more than the other ones. But yeah, I will see you when I'm done. Another day, another book finished. Well, this took me more than a day. I think it took me 4 days to read. But yeah, this is Larry's Party by Carol Shields. It was the third winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction in 1998. This is kind of, would I call it literary fiction? It's just kind of general fiction, I guess. Following a guy called Larry over, I think, 20 years of his life. Each chapter follows like a certain moment or span of time of about over the course of like each year, I guess, a couple of years. And we start with Larry at 27 and end with him at 47. He's throwing a dinner party that kind of reunites various people from over the course of his life. And he's really kind of a very ordinary person, I guess. The most extraordinary thing about him, the most unique thing about him is his fascination with hedge mazes. He really likes mazes. And yeah, he becomes like a maze designer who like gets commissioned to design hedge mazes for like stately houses and things. And that kind of consumes most of his life really. Each chapter, as well as like following kind of his life year by year, it also focuses on like a different aspect of his life. So there's a chapter about his friends, a chapter about like his marriage, a chapter about his work, a chapter about his sex life, and there are quite a few kind of flashbacks and things. It's overall it's told chronologically, but there are kind of meandering paths and stuff through that, like a maze. Oh my god, how clever! Overall, I actually liked this book. I thought it was good. It did get a little bit boring at times. There were bits of information that were repeated a few times, like stuff that is talked about earlier in the book, and then it kind of gets rehashed again later in the book. It's like, we know this already. But then it's also kind of written in a style that I think could have been like serialized. Like, it could have been like put in a like a newspaper or a magazine over the course of several weeks, and then it would have warranted like repeating certain bits of information for people who might have forgotten. So I guess this style might call for it, but like, this is a book and we know it's quite a whimsical writing style. There are bits that are like kind of mildly funny, not like laugh out loud funny, but yeah, whimsical. I think I would describe it as. Larry as a character is very ordinary. He's just, normal man. He's an innocent man. But I think at the same time he's pretty real and he's quite endearing. Like I never thought I would be reading a book about a male boomer and like be rooting for the guy, but he's like he's a decent character. You want him to do well, and like when his life is going well, you're happy. When his life is going terribly and he's facing a lot of bad luck, then you're sad. So, I think that does make a pretty good protagonist. And the book also does make some quite decent points about like kind of masculinity, the nature of masculinity, especially like men of that generation who often find it difficult to really articulate their issues, their worries, their insecurities, and that can lead to significant problems in their lives. There's often quite a difference between the Larry that we see because we're reading things from his perspective and we get insight into like his thoughts and feelings on things, and then the Larry that is projected to other people. um it's not that he like puts up a facade, but it's like he doesn't kind of he struggles to really reveal the more vulnerable parts of himself, and that can lead to problems. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting read. It was occasionally a little bit slow paced, but I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. I feel like this is the kind of book that my dad would read, so I might actually give this to him um, once I'm done with this series. So yeah, that is Larry's Party. Definitely my favourite book out of the three that I've read for this video so far. Next up, we have A Crime in the Neighbourhood by Suzanne Byrne, which won the prize in 1999. I think. Yeah, that tracks. This I think is actually the first book that doesn't have any ties to Canada in any way. All of the other three books are like related to Canada. Like in A Spell of Winter, Rob goes to Canada for a bit. Um, in Fugitive Pieces, Jacob uh, migrates to Canada, and in Larry's Party, Larry literally grows up in Winnipeg in Canada. So this one, I'm pretty sure, is set in the States. It mentions the Watergate scandal on the back. So yeah, I'm gonna get started. Hopefully, shouldn't take me too long, and I will see you when I'm done, and I'll let you know what I think. Hello, it's only been a couple of days, but I have completely sped through A Crime in the Neighbourhood by Suzanne Byrne. This won the Women's Prize for Fiction in 1999. It is set in the summer of 1972. Again, it's historical fiction. We follow our main character who's called Marsha, and she is an adult narrating this, but she's looking back on this summer when she was 10 years old, and she is living in this very kind of sleepy, ordinary, um, relatively safe neighborhood, suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. But then over the summer, there are a few events that happen that kind of make her believe that the world is less safe and predictable as she thought it was. So you have her father running off with her aunt, her mother's sister. You have a boy in her neighborhood who was murdered brutally. Um, and you also have the Watergate scandal, which was like all over the news, kind of consuming the news over the that summer. And in order to cope with these kind of reality altering events, it's quite difficult to comprehend, I guess, for a 10-year-old whose life has always been kind of pretty ordinary, and then all of these things happen at once that kind of change the way that she views the world. In order to cope with that, she starts keeping a book of evidence where she just kind of observes everything that is happening in the neighborhood around her. And she takes cuttings from news stories and things, and she writes things down. She starts kind of fixating on her new neighbor, who is a single man who has just moved in next door to her. And she starts kind of viewing him with some suspicion. She develops a bit of a compulsive lying habit in order to kind of get attention. And yeah, over the course of the book, her actions end up having a wider impact on the rest of the community. I wouldn't necessarily call it a thriller, and I wouldn't call it a murder mystery because it is told to us pretty early on in the book that the murderer, the person who killed the boy in the neighborhood, was never found. So that is something we know already. Um, but it's quite tense, but it's got that kind of almost suffocating vibe of like, yes, it's the height of summer, but also this is a very small town where everyone knows everyone and things don't stay secret for long. I did find it pretty absorbing. I think this is the book out of the four that I've read so far in this video. This is the book that I've enjoyed the most, that I've found the most interesting. I think because of the content of it, it was quite an interesting story following this murder case. But at the same time, it is quite short as well, which meant there wasn't like much room for things to drag. So yeah, I did enjoy it. The plot felt pretty predictable. I could kind of tell what was going to happen um, at the end of the book. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's a relatively forgettable book, but like I was kind of entertained. It was good. It wasn't great, but yeah, probably my favorite book out of the ones that I have read, the one that kind of interested me the most. So yeah, that is A Crime in the Neighborhood. Should we have a quick look and see what other books it beat for the Women's Prize? 1999. Oh, interesting. This is very interesting. We have Hilary Mantel, who was nominated. Um, Julia Blackburn, Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison was nominated for the Women's Prize, and she didn't win. I haven't read Paradise, but I am quite surprised that this won over a Toni Morrison novel. And then, of course, you have Barbara Kingsolver, who is the darling of the Women's Prize, who we will be seeing in later videos. That is very interesting. Again, I'm seeing a lot of historical fiction. So, yeah. I'm going to move straight on to the next book. This is When I Lived in Modern Times by Linda Grant. This is yet another historical fiction. When is it going to end?
I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
That's too damn bad!
I'm definitely going to have a lot of thoughts when I finish this book, so I will see you at some point when I'm done. Hello, I'm back. I have donned the t-shirt again for this kind of midpoint check-in. I said we were going to do 10 books in this video, and I've read 5. This is the 5th one I've now finished. This is When I Lived in Modern Times by Linda Grant. It won the Women's Prize back in 2000. It follows our main character, Evelyn Surt, who is a British Jew just after the end of World War II. After the death of her mother, she is encouraged by another family member to migrate to Palestine, where there's this kind of plan to kick the British out of the country and establish a Jewish state there. And that state eventually becomes Israel. But this is set in 1946, 1947, which is kind of the years preceding that kind of establishment there. So it's very much kind of during the fall of the British Empire, the decline of the British colony there. And yeah, the book kind of follows her migrating there, settling down, establishing a new identity for herself, and accidentally falling in with some pretty unsavory types. This book did interest me. I was very interested to see the kind of the take it would have on the establishment of Israel as a state. The politics of it all is very complicated, very nuanced, especially like around the time that this is set, because nothing is particularly certain at all. The one thing that is certain, though, is the fact that the British Empire is very much to blame for a lot of things that went horribly wrong in modern history. Um, this book is another example of that. A lot of what we have been seeing presently in the Middle East can trace its causes back to the atrocities committed by the British Empire in that area when the British Empire was still kind of a thing. It is, you know, it's kind of the root cause is colonialism. Once again, colonialism, imperialism is at fault. And this book does explore that to an extent. I wouldn't necessarily say that this book is particularly scrutinizing of the politics of it all. The focus is much more on Evelyn as a character and her experiences. And she has this kind of naivety. Like she has been told, she's been pretty much brainwashed into thinking that this place, she settles in Tel Aviv, which on the surface seems like this kind of utopian, perfect, idealist city. It's kind of the embodiment of the Zionist dream, but when you actually look closer at it, the cracks start to show in more ways than one. Like the city is not built very well. It is kind of falling apart a little bit over the next few years. And similarly, the tensions between the various groups of people who are trying to claim Palestine, that is quite high and pretty complicated as well. You have the British there, and a lot of people who would say they are British actually were like raised in Palestine and consider themselves Palestinians. But culturally, they are more British. They are descended from British colonists there. And then you have Jewish immigrants who were displaced during the Holocaust and are trying to, settle themselves somewhere more permanent. And then, of course, you have the what they call the Arabs, the kind of the native Palestinians who are kind of being edged out of this place where they have lived for generations and generations. And there isn't a lot of focus on that community. They're kind of on the fringes of everything, but they're never really kind of focused on at all. And I was starting to wonder if that was kind of a deliberate choice on the author's part, like not wanting to get into that aspect of the politics. They are mentioned very briefly in the kind of the epilogue, the last chapter of the book, which is set more in the present day and does actually, well, present day, it's still the late 90s. There is a brief kind of acknowledgement of the genocide that Israel, as it later became, was doing on those people. So, like, there is an acknowledgement of that, but I feel like there could have maybe been a little bit more, maybe, especially in kind of the main body of the book. But again, perhaps that is the main character, the narrator, being naive and not really taking notice of that. Maybe it's a conscious thing. So yeah, I do I give it a pass? I don't know. It's yeah, I don't know. Other aspects of the book. I liked the setting. I did like the descriptions of the setting. It was very vivid. This kind of presentation of Tel Aviv as the this kind of metaphor for the the Zionist ideal. Like on the surface, it seems kind of utopian, like a dream come true, but once you look closer, there start to be some like really big problems. I also thought that the this kind of exploration of Evelyn's identity and the kind of the struggle that she has in reconciling her identity as a British woman with that of a Jewish woman. She is both British and Jewish, and that's quite conflicting. Um, in a time and a place where those two identities seem to be diametrically opposed. She is simultaneously too Jewish to be fully British and too British to be fully Jewish, and that kind of puts her in a little bit of a limbo. But in terms of the other characters in the book, and there are a lot of other characters in this book, you do meet a lot of different people, but they all seem very one-dimensional, like not developed, quite caricature-esque. And again, I wonder if that is a deliberate kind of narrative choice that kind of tells us more about how the narrator sees the world and the people around her. But at the same time, it just didn't really make for particularly engaging reading. Similarly, the pacing did drag a lot. Again, it might be me just not being a fan of historical fiction set in this point in time. But yeah, I did get a little bit bored for probably the second half of the book. I was just kind of waiting for the next thing to happen. So yeah, not my least favorite book out of the ones I've read, but not my favorite either. But it was interesting. It was definitely it was an interesting read. Not like super interesting that it kept me engaged all the time, but like yeah, I don't know. It was interesting. Shall we have a quick look at what other books were nominated in the same year? Okay, so we have Girl with a Pearl Earring by Tracy Chevalier, which is like a pretty popular book. Um, what else? White Teeth by Zadie Smith was nominated, and it didn't win. White Teeth was nominated, and this book won over it. That is confusing. We also have Divine Secrets of the Yaga Sisterhood. We have Elizabeth Strout's first appearance. We will be seeing her again later. I think she makes quite a few long lists. We have A.L. Kennedy again as well. Yeah, okay. I feel like this is a slightly more diverse list than other ones I've seen, both in terms of like genre and in terms of authors as well. Oh, I think we have Kieran Desai as well. Um, Appearance, Fasting, Feasting. Yeah, interesting. I would say I'm surprised that When I Lived in Modern Times won over all of those books, but given the other books that have won the Women's Prize before this one, I think it does kind of track. Once again, historical fiction. So yeah. So with that read, we are now halfway through this video, and because I said I was going to read like 6 books a month, um, when I was doing this challenge, I now have one book left to read in January, and that is The Idea of Perfection by Kate Grenville, which won the 2001 Women's Prize for Fiction. This is definitely the chunkiest book that I have to read so far, so this might take me a while. It's a little bit daunting, I'm not going to lie. This, I believe, is set in Australia. I'm going to make a start, and I will see you at some point. I don't know when, but yeah, I'll see you at some point. Hello, I'm back, and I have finished another book. This is The Idea of Perfection by Kate Grenville. It won the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2001. This book is set in a very small town in Australia, um, and it used to be kind of a very kind of agricultural town selling wool and meat and stuff, but it's kind of been falling apart a little bit. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. It's a very kind of close knit community with a lot of gossip. News travels fast, and it's very kind of atmospheric as well. Like you get this real sense that you are very much in the Australian outback. It's very hot and dusty, and there are bugs everywhere. So this book kind of has an A plot and a B plot. You have the A plot, which follows 2 people who are coming to the small town from Sydney on business, different business. You have Douglas, who is an engineer who has been tasked with taking down this old, dilapidated bridge on the outskirts of the town. And then you have Harley, who is a curator for a museum in Sydney, who has kind of been enlisted to help the town set up a heritage museum. And they kind of they don't quite butt heads really, but like they're kind of on opposite sides of like kind of maintaining history. Like Harley kind of accidentally gets involved in this plot to try and stop the destruction of this ancient bridge, because there's like history and heritage attached to it. And yeah, Douglas is just there. He's there. He doesn't necessarily want to take down this bridge if he doesn't need to, but like his boss has told him to, so he is very much in the firing line. But when they meet, there's kind of a little bit of a spark between them. I don't know if I'd necessarily call it a meet cute that they have, but they they kind of have this really sweet kind of fumbling around. Like it's very obvious that they both like each other, but they're both older. They both have been married. They are not conventionally attractive at all. In fact, it's very clearly stated that they are not very much not conventionally attractive, and like they kind of take up space, and they're quite self-conscious. They're both self-conscious about the fact they take up space, and they don't have the best social skills. They're both very awkward. I think they're both probably neurodivergent and undiagnosed, or at least like Douglas has very severe social anxiety, and they are both kind of constantly overthinking their like how they behave in social situations. And that is incredibly relatable. Like, for example, Douglas will say something and then he'll immediately be like, why did I say that? Why did I say that? I am an idiot. You know, the whole kind of like, you're going to meet someone and you're a little bit nervous, so you might want to like practice the conversation in front of the mirror and like rehearse and practice facial expressions and stuff. Like, that is kind of what they do. It's like really relatable. So you had this kind of slow burn, wholesome romance between the two of them while they're both kind of, well, Harley's setting up this heritage museum, and Douglas is like kind of taking down the bridge, but also trying to work out how he can save it at the same time. And that's the A plot. The B plot focuses on one of the locals to this town who is called Felicity. And she's very kind of prim and proper. It's quite uptight. She likes a routine. She likes everything to be clean. She kind of reminds me a little bit of Amanda from Motherland, I think, is kind of the closest kind of character I would associate her with. She's quite uppity and all that. And the B plot follows her engaging in an affair with the town's butcher. And yeah, it was just funny and entertaining, really. And I did quite enjoy having that B plot of just kind of breaking up the overarching narrative between Douglas and Harley, just having that extra little bit of entertainment as well. I do think that the A plot and the B plot could have been more connected with each other. Um, like they did feel very much like two separate stories. I think Felicity does interact with Harley a couple times, but like especially towards the end, I was kind of hoping for some kind of resolution that would involve all three characters together, but that never really happened. So yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say that the B plot was irrelevant because it was entertaining. I did enjoy it, but I think maybe the book could have had more subplots, maybe including the points of view of other people in the town. Like you get introduced to a lot of like townsfolk, a lot of locals who all seem to have like a certain story. So like I don't know, maybe more subplots involving them could have really kind of brought the town to life. And yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe my point is that the book should have been longer, which is weird for me to say because it is quite a long book and it's pretty slow paced. I don't know. There were maybe occasions where I got a little bit bored, but I don't know. It's got a nice writing style. It's very kind of whimsical, and it really kind of brings out the awkwardness, I guess, of all of these people who don't really know how to interact socially, like as humans. Shall we have a look to see what other books were nominated in the same year? 2001. Okay, so we have The Power Book by Jeanette Winterson. We have The Bonesetter's Daughter by Amy Tan. What else? Hotel World by Ali Smith, which I do own and I want to read at some point. I do like Ali Smith. The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood. Is that the second year in a row that Margaret Atwood was nominated? Or like, was that the year before? The number of nominations as well has decreased. I think before this it was 20. It's gone down to 18 now. But yeah, I'm definitely seeing more diversity in terms of both authors and in terms of genre. Like we're seeing a bit more kind of contemporary fiction um in the nominations, not just historical fiction. There's still quite a bit of historical fiction, but it's not just historical fiction. So yeah, that is book 6 done. And I did say that I was only going to do 6 books a month so I didn't like burn out and stuff. And we are getting towards the end of January as well. So I think I've managed to pace myself pretty well. And as a little treat, I do have some fun books I want to read until the end of the month. So I've got a proof copy of Hell's Heart by Alexis Hall right here. And after I have work this afternoon, when I come home, I am not doing anything until Monday evening. So that's like a solid amount of time where I can just curl up and read this book. Don't Burn Anyone at the Stake Today by Naomi Alderman, which is nonfiction, tiny little book. This was one of my nonfiction picks for my 2026 reading list, my 26 books I needed to read in 2026. I'm not doing like last year, I tried to read at least one nonfiction book a month. I'm not setting myself that goal officially, but like I still want to read nonfiction. So yeah, I think this is a good place to start. It's about living through an information crisis, which I think is really apt because I honestly, the January blues are getting to me, and I think it's the fact that I spend a lot of time on the internet, and everything on the internet right now seems to be terrible. So I don't know, maybe this might help me cope. Maybe it might make things worse. I don't know. And then I also have this, which came in the post the other day, which I'm very excited about. This is Half Its Age by Jeanette McCurdy. Jeanette McCurdy's debut novel. She wrote I'm Glad My Mum Died, which was everywhere, basically. And yeah, this sounds fantastic and definitely one of my most anticipated reads of this year. And I'm so excited that it's here and I can read it. So I think I'm gonna read Hell's Heart first, then Don't Burn Anyone at the Stake, and this can be my final treat. And then February is Fantasy February, so I'm not actually continuing with my Women's Prize reading until March because I'm just going to focus on fantasy books. I have a lot of like really long fantasy books I want to read next month, so I'm going to be focusing fully on that. And then March, I will return to this challenge. So I guess I will see you then at the beginning of March with the next book, which is this one, I think. Bel Canto by Anne Patchett. This is what I'm going to be reading for this video next. So yeah, I will see you then. Hello, hello. It has been a while for me, not for you. Yeah, it is now March. We survived February. We did Fantasy February. I have a video up of it. We lived. It was great. Yeah, but we are now back to our regularly scheduled programming of reading through the Women's Prize winners. It was nice to take a little bit of a break and read something in a completely different genre because fantasy books don't get nominated for the Women's Prize. Um, so, yeah, it was nice to kind of have a little bit of a break, a little bit of a palate cleanser. But we are back, and I have finished the next book that was on my list, which is Bel Canto by Anne Patchett. This won the Orange Prize in 2002. This is a literary fiction book. It's, I believe, contemporary literary fiction for the time, set in like, well, it's not really specified, but it probably is set in like the late 90s. It takes place in an unnamed Latin American country where a birthday concert for a Japanese tech CEO is overrun by terrorists who want to kidnap the president of this unnamed Latin American country because they think that he'll be there. But the president is not there. And what results is a, a very long term and kind of disorganized hostage situation with all of these very rich, reasonably powerful people from all over the world. There are so many people from like very different countries, all being held hostage by this group of terrorists who are all working class, struck by poverty. They're in gangs. A lot of them are very young. A lot of them are children who are recruited into this gang, often like not really out of choice. And over the course of the book and over the course of this hostage situation, you kind of get to learn a lot more about all of the different characters in who are trapped inside this large house where this whole thing is taking place. And you get tentative friendships, allyships starting to form, tentative relationships starting to form. Um, Among kind of this group of hostages, you have this renowned soprano, this operatic soprano who's a bit of a diva, um, but her voice is absolutely incredible. You have obviously the Japanese tech CEO billionaire who like the birthday party was thrown for. You have his translator who is a polyglot who knows a lot of languages. So as a result, he's kind of recruited to translate between like everyone in this situation. And he is busy and he is genuinely just trying his best the whole time. You really feel for him. You have the vice president who actually hosted the birthday party at his house, and like his house is where this whole thing is happening, and he's kind of playing host the whole time. And he like again he's trying his best. He didn't want any of this, but like he's making lemonade out of lemons here. In terms of story, it is quite slow paced. The fact that it all happens in this one house does mean the plot is it's quite slow paced. It doesn't really go anywhere. It does take a while to get into it. Really, it took me probably about 100 pages to really kind of be sucked into the story. And yeah, it is very character driven. So if you like character driven books, if you like extended character studies, then you might enjoy this. It reminded me a little bit of a Jonas Jonasson book. Not any book in particular, but just like kind of the whole vibe of you have a lot of unlikely characters who would never normally interact with each other under normal circumstances. Like they would never be in the same room as each other. They're, you know, from completely different walks of life, completely different parts of the world. But because of these very, very unusual, unique, unlikely circumstances, they're all kind of forced together and kind of made to interact with each other. And, you know, that has quite entertaining results. Like that is something that happens in a lot of Jonas Jonasson books, and it's something that happens here. Also, like similar vibes to like Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. Again with like the hostage situation. That you know it could have been planned better. I do have a couple of criticisms, and if you allow me to be feminist on main, um, yeah, I'm probably gonna go into a bit of a rant here. I didn't really love the fact that the female characters were just kind of there to be objects of desire. You have three female characters. One of them is a child, so thankfully she is written as a child. She's fine. But the two other characters, like there is not a scene that happens that involves them where their like beauty or their mysterious allure is not mentioned. Like they will be talking to a man and that man will be like, oh my god, she's so pretty, oh my god, I'm in love. It might just, you know, be the fact that there aren't very many women here and I haven't like had sex with my wife in a while, but like I'm so horny right now. It felt extremely she breasted boobily down the stairs, like that same kind of vibe. Like it was just constantly mentioned how fit they were to these all of these men. And that was most of their character. They were always depicted in relation to the men. Like you have the opera singer, and you know, she's an interesting character. She does have some other character traits. Although saying that, I can't really say what other character traits she does have. Like she's very devoted to the craft, the art of music. Every time she sings, the focus is not on her voice, but it's on the effect that her voice has on the audience, i.e., the men. And it's just, yeah, it's I'm not a massive fan of that. Also, I'm just gonna say the epilogue really pissed me off. So if you are thinking of reading this, just skip the epilogue. You don't need it. What it does is it pairs off two characters who have no chemistry. Like, yes, they talk to each other in the book, but like they're both involved in romances with other characters, and there is no chemistry between them. But then, like, in the epilogue, they're getting married. And it's just like, you can't just let a woman be. You can't just let a woman be alone. It was like there were literally only two endings that could happen for a woman in this book. Either she gets married or she ends up dead. Like, you can't just you can't envision an ending for a woman where she is single and happy and alive. Anyway, that's me done. I'm gonna stop ranting. Sorry for being woke on main, I guess. That said, I did really like this. Genuinely, I think this is probably my favorite book out of the books I have read in this video so far. It is really good. I'm not gonna let the ending spoil that. I'm not gonna let the fact that this doesn't pass the Bechdel test spoil that. Um, yeah, it was really good. I would recommend it. So yeah, that is Bel Canto by Anne Patchett. Shall we take a look at what other books it was up against? It has been a while since I've done this, so oh, I still have the tab open. That's great. Give me 1 second. Okay, there's actually a lot of authors that I've never heard of, which is interesting. Oh, Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. That is quite interesting. We have another Helen Dunmore. We have The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. We have a Joanne Harris. Okay, a few authors I do recognize, a few books I do recognize. Yeah, I I can't really say whether or not this did or didn't deserve to win because I don't know enough about the other books to like really say. I haven't read any of the other books. But it's a solid read. I definitely see why this book appealed to the judges of the Women's Prize in 2002. Yeah. I'm going to move straight on to Property by Valerie Martin. This won the prize in 2003. It's a very short book, so hopefully shouldn't take me very long to read. It is historical fiction, unfortunately, which again, not really my thing. But yeah, and also the long list for the Women's Prize this year is being announced tomorrow. So the next time I see you, we will have an idea of what books could win the Women's Prize this year. What books could be added to this list that I have to read. So I will see you when I'm done with this, and I'll let you know what I think. Hello, I lied. The long list hasn't come out yet. In fact, it is the same day. I finished Property by Valerie Martin. I read this in like the space of a couple of hours. Like maybe 3 hours, maybe 4 hours. Like a couple of sittings within the same day. This book is another historical fiction. Yay! This one is set in the Deep South, pre-abolition. It's set in like the 1820s, on a sugar plantation, and we follow the wife of the owner of the sugar plantation. She is the main character. She is pretty unhappy with her marriage. I mean, her husband is a real piece of work. He abuses his slaves. He's a bit of a brute during sex. He's very much a brute during sex. He has fathered children with slaves. Generally, he is terrible. She's not much better, to be honest. She is also pretty horrible to the slaves that she owns. She uses them, and in particular the one slave that she personally owns, her maid Sarah. She uses her as kind of her one way of exercising power. She doesn't have a lot of power in her marriage as a woman in the 1800s, but because she is a white woman and a slave owner, she does have power in some ways, and she uses and abuses that power. And in this book, we follow this woman, the wife. Her name is Manor, and she experiences an uprising um, of some of the slaves, and she deals with deaths in the family, and yeah. To be honest, not a massive amount happens. This is kind of a character-driven book, but at the same time, it is just a book where not much happens, or at least not much changes between the start of the book and the end of the book. There are like one or two kind of major things that change, but overall, not much really changes. It was definitely an interesting choice to have the narrator of this book be the plantation owner's wife. I think the obvious choice for this book probably would have been to have it told from Sarah's perspective, because that in itself is definitely a very interesting and important story to tell. So it is quite unusual to have this book from the perspective of a different character from I would say the villain in the story. And I would definitely say she is the villain. I was a little bit confused about whether the author wanted you as the reader to sympathize with her at all, because she doesn't have a lot of power as a woman in the 1800s. She doesn't have a lot of like legal powers. Like she doesn't own anything personally. Anything that she does own or like get an inheritance, she automatically it automatically goes to her husband, and he is the one who controls it. So like legally, financially, she doesn't have a lot of power. But at the same time, that is nowhere near the same position as like the people that she and her husband literally own. It did kind of feel like the author was trying to write her in a vaguely sympathetic way, at least at first. At least in the first part of the book. It was like the author was being like, hey, at least this woman, she doesn't beat her slaves, she doesn't rape her slaves. So, at least she's better than her husband. It still doesn't make her a good person. And in fact, she does later sexually assault Sarah. And that scene is just kind of glossed over and never mentioned again. So, yeah, I don't really know what happened there. At least by the end of the book, it is very clear who the villain in the story is. The fact that Manon is not a good person at all. So there is very much a villain arc. It was just like, at first, I struggled with kind of getting a read on Manon. And yeah, just overall, I was always rooting for the slaves. I was never rooting for Manon or her husband. No matter there are some pretty terrible things, pretty traumatic things that do happen to her in this book. It doesn't mean I was in any way sympathetic to her. I was always rooting for the people that she literally owns. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of conflicted about this book. It was a very easy read. It was a quick read. It wasn't an easy read. It was an uncomfortable read, but it was a quick read. Um, it was good. It was okay. Again, not a genre I would gravitate towards ever, but I can appreciate it definitely. Shall we have a quick look to see what other books were nominated in 2003? Let's have a look. Straight away, The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold was nominated. That is interesting. The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. Call me an idiot, but I genuinely thought The Little Friend was Donna Tartt's first book rather than The Secret History. Yeah, that was nominated. Quite surprised it didn't win. Same with The Autograph Man by Zadie Smith. We are going to see Zadie Smith, I think, in the next video. But interesting to see that she was nominated in 2003. Carol Shields, who wrote Larry's Party, she was nominated as well. And then a lot of other authors that I don't recognise. So, yeah, I am a little bit surprised about the fact that this book won, but at the same time, I'm not that surprised as well, because it is quite rare, especially like in the first few years of the Women's Prize. I've noticed it's quite rare that they tend to pick a winner that is like one of the hyped books, one of the more famous, well-known books. They tend to go for one that is a little more kind of understated, maybe not from a particularly famous author. I think that has changed a little bit with the rise of social media and book talk specifically. Like you had the Safekeep win last year, which was massive on book talk, and like everyone was reading it. I think also because it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize as well. Like, it was already pretty well known. Same with Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, that won the Women's Prize in 2023, I want to say, and it was already winning like Goodreads Choice Awards and stuff. Um, like, it was already massively popular. So yeah, I think social media has changed that, but it is interesting to see what other kind of more well-known books and authors were nominated alongside the books that won and are less popular nowadays. So I might as well move on to the next book. And actually, the next few books are proper chunky, so I don't think I will be finishing another book in a single day again. So next up we have Small Island by Andrea Levy. It's a big book. And yeah, this is going to be the penultimate book in this video. Won the Orange Prize for Fiction in 2004. Yes, 2004. I've only come across one other person, like, on social media that I follow who has read this, and they gave a very, very positive review. So hopefully I will agree. Hopefully I will also enjoy this. I believe it's also historical fiction. Yes, it is historical fiction. It's set in 1948. So it's another post-war historical fiction. My favorite. Yay. I'm going to get started, and I will let you know my thoughts when I'm done. Hello, I'm back, and I have finished another book. This is Small Island by Andrea Levy. This won the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2004. Is that the year? I want to say. This book is historical fiction. It follows two different couples. You have Gilbert and Hortense, who are Jamaican, and Queenie and Bernard, who are English. And over the course of a few days in 1948, they all end up living at the same address. And yeah, it's quite tense. There are a lot of tensions, racial tensions between them, and yeah, things kind of kick off. But that isn't actually kind of most of the story. Most of the story doesn't take place in 1948. This book lied. It said it took place in 1948. It lied. Most of it actually takes place through like flashbacks to the past. You get each of the four different characters' backstories from before the war, mostly during the war. So this is very much a wartime historical fiction book, which, as we know, isn't my thing. It just doesn't interest me at all. However, what I did appreciate about this book is that it provides a slightly different take on the war. I think one of the things that kind of turns me off wartime historical fiction is the fact that it can sometimes sound a bit like propaganda for the British Empire. And what I mean by that is, like, you so often get kind of your classic wartime books that kind of see things very much in black and white. You have, the Brits and the Americans are all the good guys, and everything they do is so heroic and amazing. And as someone who knows probably a little bit more history than the average person, and because of that, is pretty disillusioned with the idea of the British Empire and Britain as a whole being, such a great civilized country. That is very much not something that appeals to me, but this book, I think, takes a slightly different direction, a slightly different perspective that actually, calls out some of the problems with Britain during the war and also shortly after the war. And most of that is to do with racism. There's a lot of kind of hypocrisy that we see in this book. You have the Allied forces, you have the British Army and the US Army, who are, they're there. They're all fighting together against the Nazis and what the Nazis stood for. But at the same time, there is so much racism that happens within those two armies. There is segregation in the US Army, even them being on British soil and, on paper having to abide by British laws, that doesn't stop them from trying to enforce segregation within their army, and even on like black British folks and black Jamaican folks who are, still fighting in the same army against the same people. And then even after the war, you get people like Gilbert who fought for the British Army and tried to return to the UK to, seek a better life and get a job and, live there with his wife. And then he's suddenly told that like there are no jobs for him, despite him, being a war hero and fighting in the same army as all of these other soldiers who are coming back to, really warm welcomes and getting jobs and things. And he's not afforded that luxury because of the color of his skin. And that's not really something that I personally had ever really thought about or considered, the fact that there would be so much racism in the British Army and in Britain at that time. But then I'm like, why haven't I thought about this before? Why haven't I considered this? So yeah, it's definitely a very eye-opening read. In terms of like the actual book, um, characters wise, all four of the main characters were kind of different degrees of infuriating. They all kind of annoyed me in different ways and at different levels. Like Hortense kind of annoyed me a little bit, just a tiny bit. Then Gilbert annoyed me a little bit more. Then you have Queenie, who, like, yes, she is racist at times, but she means well, and it's more out of like not being educated rather than like any malicious intent. And then, obviously, finally, we have Bernard, who is maliciously and violently racist. He obviously was the character that infuriated me the most. And the fact that like he doesn't really get any pushback, he doesn't get any kind of repercussions for how big of a asshole he is. That that annoyed me quite a bit. I think the biggest flaw with this book was the fact that so much of it happened in flashbacks. There really is not much that takes place in 1948, and it's dragged out so it feels like a little bit more, but overall, it really is just a few days. And most of the book does happen in these flashbacks that just didn't really interest me as much as the stuff happening in 1948 when all four of these stories, these lives collide in quite spectacular ways. And the rest of the book, I just was kind of slogging through just to get back to that part of the story. I wasn't as interested in like the backstories. I understand like there is information in the backstories that you do have to know in order to like fully appreciate what is happening in 1948. So like it is essential to read that, but I it didn't make me any less bored during it. So overall, well, I wouldn't say that this is my favorite book that I've read in this video by far. I still definitely think it's worth the read. I think it's pretty well written, like the prose is pretty good. Um I did like the kind of the narration style. It's told in like multiple POVs, so you have four different POVs, and they all felt quite distinct. Like I don't think there was really a time when I was trying to remember who was speaking, what perspective we were in any particular chapter. I think it was quite clear, which I liked. I definitely appreciate the story that it's telling, despite the fact that it's a period of time that I'm not massively invested in. Um, so yeah, I still definitely consider it worth the read, um, even if I didn't particularly enjoy it a massive amount. Shall we see what other books it was up against? Another Toni Morrison. We have Love by Toni Morrison. Again, call me an idiot, but I genuinely had no idea Toni Morrison was still writing in the 2000s. And that's extremely uneducated and uncultured of me to say, so I apologize. Then we also have like classics like Brick Lane by Monica Ali, The Time Traveler's Wife. We have Anne Tyler. We have Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. We have Rose Tremaine. We have Purple Hibiscus by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, which we're going to see in a couple of years. Notes on the Scandal by Zoe Heller. We have a lot of books that have kind of become modern classics nowadays, which is wild. 2003 was kind of a stacked year for women's publishing. That's pretty cool. Again, kind of shocked that Toni Morrison never won the Women's Prize despite being nominated twice now. And also kind of surprised that Margaret Atwood never won the Women's Prize as well, despite being nominated a few times also. But I definitely see where the judges were coming from by having this as the winner, choosing this one. I definitely see the appeal to the panel, the importance of the story that it's telling, the writing style. So yeah, despite being up against some absolute mega icons of literature, I'm not massively surprised that this won out because it is a good book. It's a good read. So we are finally, because I feel like this video has probably gone on for ages. I mean, I haven't gotten to like the editing stage yet, and I fear when that time comes. But we've finally gotten to the final book that I'm going to talk about in this video, and that is we need to talk about Kevin by Lionel Shriver. Genuinely, I spent probably about 24 years of my life thinking Lionel Shriver was a man, and then finding out that this won the Women's Prize for Fiction, I was like, why would a man be there? Why would a man be there?
Why would a man be there?
But this, I am pretty sure, is a contemporary for 2005, contemporary literary fiction, which is pretty refreshing to see. It's about a school shooting, I must say, which sounds really fun to read about. It's going to be a real downer of a book, so yeah, wish me luck. I think I'm going to need it. So yeah, I'm going to get reading, and I will see you very soon, I'm sure, for the last update of this video. Hello, I'm back, and yesterday I finished reading We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver, and we need to talk about this book. This is a book that is told from the perspective of a mother called Eva, whose son at the age of 15 stages a school shooting at a school. He shoots 7 pupils and 2 staff members at his school. And the book is told in the form of letters that this mother writes to her ex-husband, kind of telling the story of the boy Kevin's childhood and upbringing from her perspective, giving her view on the whole situation, because it is clear from the get-go that at least from Eva's point of view, because she is a pretty unreliable narrator, at least from her point of view, this boy is the devil from the Bible. Like, he is a psychopath in like the psychological sense, in like the actual medical sense. He doesn't form attachments to anything. He has pretty much no sense of morals, or at least a sense of like guilt based on morals. He knows when his actions are wrong, but he doesn't care, essentially, if he does bad things. Look, I wanted to enjoy this book, or at the very least not enjoy it, because it's not an enjoyable subject at all. I wanted to appreciate it. I wanted to, be interested. However, I came so close to DNFing this book, and this is coming from someone who has not DNF'd a single book since I started recording my reading in 2022. I have not DNF'd a single book, but I came so close with this one. I think if I hadn't been reading this for a challenge, for a video, it would have gone in the bin. In fact, I was pretty much skimming this book. I was skim reading it from about page 200 onwards. So for more than half of the book, I was just kind of looking over the words. And I've still managed to get like the full sense of the story, because the prose is just so long-winded, filled with adjectives and stuff. It's so flowery that like you can skim through a paragraph and nothing is said. Nothing of substance is said, and you can just kind of get the gist of what is going on, and it still makes complete sense. Like, this book could have been half the length. It could have been an email. Also, every single character is insufferable. I was expecting Kevin to be insufferable. I was expecting him to be really annoying and unlikable. He's not even the worst character in this book. That is how awful all of the characters are. I'm pretty sure that Eva's husband, who is called Franklin, I want to say, I'm pretty sure Franklin was written to be unlikable, an unlikable character, because it's told from Eva's point of view, and, she feels a lot of resentment towards her husband. And he is incredibly annoying. As much as I didn't like Eva, I was begging for her to leave him, divorce him.
Divorce, babe, divorce.
But Eva has to be the most insufferable character in the entire book, which is great when she's the main character. And look, I love an unlikable character. I think unlikable characters, when they're done well, are fantastic. When they're written to be unlikable, when they are deliberately written to be unlikable. The thing is, I don't think Eva was written to be unlikable. I think she was meant to be like the relatable main character that we root for. And as I was reading, I was like, why am I struggling to like Eva so much? Why am I struggling to root for her? Why does Eva seem like so much of a scumbag? And so I did a little bit of research into Lionel Shriver as a person, as an author. And I think I think I cracked the code. I think Eva is an unlikable character, an unlikable protagonist, because Lionel Shriver just isn't that great of a person. It honestly feels like throughout the course of this book, Shriver just takes every opportunity that she can to promote her right wing views and talk about what she thinks is wrong with the USA, which can be anything from like anti intellectualism to lack of accountability to consumerism to fat people. Like, she goes on a whole tirade about fat people being the worst thing to come out of America. Like, what the hell? You guys have Donald Trump and you think fat people are the worst thing to come out of America? And there is also liberal use of the R slur in this book. And I get that this book was written in 2003, it was published in 2003, written probably before that. But still, like, it is unnecessary. It's unnecessary. I do have more receipts about why I feel a little bit icky about talking about Lionel Shriver, even if I'm not promoting her book, even if I say, don't read this book, you're better off watching Adolescence if you want to have a story about, like, kids being incited to violence and stuff. Just watch Adolescence. So she endorsed Ron DeSantis in the presidential election. He's the guy from Florida who, like, introduced kind of the Don't Say Gay bill and is really, really against, like, women's rights, abortion and stuff. Terrible person. She didn't like Donald Trump, but somehow she instead thought Ron DeSantis was a better option. I don't know. In a speech at an Australian book festival, she denounced the concept of cultural appropriation in writing, essentially saying, like, I write what I want and I don't care if it's offensive, if it's badly researched, if it's not researched, if it's an offensive stereotype. I don't care. And I do think it's not a great idea for authors to, like, completely stay in their lane and just write what they know. I think they should include various types of representation in their writing, but it has to be well researched. It has to be, sensitivity checked and stuff. It can't be overtly racist, which I was getting, like, very subtle racist undertones from parts of this book that involved racial minorities. I'm not gonna lie. She supported Brexit, despite not actually being British. She is extremely vocally anti-woke. In fact, her most recent book, Mania, which was published in 2024, we got a copy of it in our shop, in the charity shop where I work, and it legitimately stayed on the shelf, despite being a hardback in great condition. Literally the year after it was published, it stayed on the shelf for a solid, like, 3 weeks. And I think we actually had to, like, bring the price down in order for someone to actually, like, take it away. No one wanted it. Um, it's a novel that satirizes anti-intellectualism and cancel culture. It's the blurb is literally it's like, in a world not very much like our own, it's illegal to say the word stupid. Everyone has equal intelligence, and you can get cancelled, you can get expelled from school for saying stupid, you can get fired from a job for saying stupid. And it's just so very much like those people who are like, oh, you can't say anything on the internet these days or else the woke police are going to get you. It's like, imagine publishing a book that has that concept of the woke police are going to get me for saying something mildly controversial. Honestly, could not be me. Highly embarrassing. So, yeah, while I am very glad that I only spent 50p on this book in a charity shop, I still want a refund. I want a refund for the amount of time that it took for me to read this book. I want it back. So, yeah, that was fun. This was book number 10 for this video. It's the final book. I'm sorry we ended on such a downer, but overall, I didn't love any of these books. There were some that I liked, but I can't say that I loved all of them. In fact, I did a little kind of mini calculation, and my average rating for all of these books overall was 2.95 stars out of 5. They range from 2 stars to 3.75 stars. But yeah, the average was 2.95. And considering my overall average rating for books in the whole of 2025 was 3.95 stars, that is a full star lower than my average rating, which is kind of wild. So, yeah, that is how I felt. And if we were to rank these books from 10th place to first place, I would have to say 10th place, this book. I hate Kevin. 9th place, A Spell of Winter. Ironically, the first book I read in this video and the last book, the worst books. So yeah, that's fun. 8th place, probably Fugitive Pieces by Anne Michaels. 7th place, When I Lived in Modern Times. 6th place, Property by Valerie Martin. 5th place, A Crime in the Neighbourhood. 4th place, Small Island, and that's probably where I draw the line between, like, I liked this book and I couldn't care less about this book, or I didn't like this book at all. So 4th place, Small Island. Top 3, 3rd place, Larry's Party. 2nd place, The Idea of Perfection, although those two are kind of interchangeable. 1st place, definitely Bel Canto, because I really like this one. I, again, can't say that I loved it, but I did enjoy it. Definitely. So yeah, those are the first 10 winners of the Winners' Prize, and I gotta say, for the rest of the winners, the bar is on the floor. I really hope that there are some better books, some books that at least I subjectively enjoy more in the future. I should probably, I keep forgetting to do this. Talk about what other books were nominated alongside. We need to talk about Kevin, because I am interested to see what other books were nominated. 2005. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, there are a lot of books I do not recognize at all. A few authors that I do recognize, people like Joyce Carol Oates, Kate Atkinson, Anita Desai. Actually, the only other books I do recognize are A Short History of Practicing Ukrainian and Old Filth. But that's literally it. The year before might have been an abundance of great books, best-selling books. This year looks like more of a drought. So yeah, I'm not surprised that we need to talk about Kevin 1, because at least, like, it elicited a strong emotional response from me, even if that strong emotional response was highly negative. You know, there is something to say about a highly divisive book. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Well done for getting to this point. It's probably a really, really long video because I have definitely yapped for a long time about all of these books, all 10 of them. But yeah, if you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. You can also find me on Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Storygraph. My username on all those platforms is @WithLivJones, which is the same as it is on here. I am pretty sure if everything goes according to schedule, if I keep to my schedule, I should be back with part 2 of Reading the Women's Prize next month. Maybe, possibly early May, but definitely within like a couple months, I should have read another few books, enough to like give you a video. But I'm pretty sure, counting the 10 books I read for this video plus the 6 books I have already read, the 6 winners that I already read prior to the start of this year, I am over halfway through all of the books. I have read more than half of the winners, which is pretty good going. I'm not gonna lie, I'm quite proud of myself. So yeah, I'm gonna stop talking now. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!